My identity at the time was, what's your next promotion at this world's biggest bank? And how many people work underneath you? And what are you driving? And what neighborhood are you moving into next? I had to melt down what I thought were my dreams. I had to melt down what I thought was the vision that I thought we were going to ride off into the sunset with, even though I was like, 29 or 8 or whatever the heck it was at the time. Had I stayed with that bank and worked my way up to the very top, we still wouldn't have made near what we were able to make in this new expanded form after the Inferno.
Welcome, everybody, to the Chris Harder Show, where we are making you unapologetic about your pursuit of success, knowing that when good people like you make good money, they can then do great things. My name is Chris Harder, and several times per week, I will bring you epic guests, solo episodes, and every single tool, trick, and skill set you need to grow your business, grow your money mindset, and to grow your wealth to levels that you have never reached before. I've ended up in a unique place in life where I've got the experience, the connections, and all of the secrets that it takes to be successful. And I'm lifting the curtain to reveal it all to you in an effort to help put you in a position of abundance so great that you can then be as generous as possible. So let's lock arms and let's get started.
And we're back.
With another episode of He Said, She Said.
And we are right back where we started this time last year, where everybody is transferring into a new year and new goals and new situations. And some of you are coming off a great year, and a lot of you, I'm hearing, are coming off a really tough year where it almost like, I don't know, you've like all your plans collapsed around you, all of your goals collapsed around you, all of the things that you thought held true in your life all of a sudden changed for you this past year.
Maybe broke you.
And I want to share with you that you're not alone if that's how you're kind of feeling as you look back on this year as we transfer from 25 into 26, because some of our highest performing big name friends, all the way down to like people we know that are, you'll never know of them, but they're just awesome human beings that also had big plans and goals. And everybody in between, they're all experiencing this change. They're all experiencing like, wait, what the hell happened to the plan that I thought was going to unfold in 2025? Now, there's a lot of reasons why, right? The economy, it's kind of funky out there right now. Yeah, the stock market is scrambling, but everything else is pretty stagnant or weird, especially on what I call Main Street. On top of that, AI is changing things quicker than you realize, and the changes have been bigger than you realize. You just don't realize it yet. That, and there's just this weird, let's call it liquidity issue in the system. There's lots of liquidity in the system, but it's held by a very few right now that are not necessarily investing into the part of the system that the average everyday person is taking part in. And so I'm talking to everybody from people that just have $50,000 or $100,000 goals all the way up to, like I said, our highest performing friends that had, 20 or 30 or $50 million goals this year. And everyone's like, what the hell happened in 25? I'm having a meltdown. And the entire point of this episode is when you feel like you might be having a meltdown, you're really just being melted down into a brand new form, a very valuable form that you're going to be able to show up as over the next several years.
Okay, so quite a few years ago, I was talking on one of my podcasts. I believe it was just a quickie, and I was in one of these phases where I was in the fire. And when you are in it, it is hard to see a way out. And it is hard to believe that this could possibly be happening for you. It's almost like even if you're a personal development person, you're like, what the hell? You start questioning everything. You start wanting to say like, this is a bunch of bullshit. Like you can start making people bad because you're like, okay, yeah, maybe this self-help stuff worked at one point, but it's not going to get me out of this position. And I was literally just thinking about a glassblower, and I was making up essentially a story while I was podcasting, and it came to be this story that I'm about to tell you. And it's been one that I essentially cling on to pretty much every year, because if you're an entrepreneur, if you're on the personal development journey at all, then you're going to experience what I'm about to share and what Chris just talked about over and over, sometimes every year, sometimes multiple times a year. Sometimes you go on a few good year run where you're just like, this has been a great few years and everything feels good and everything feels easy. And then all of a sudden it's like, here you are again, finding yourself in the fire. So I want you to think about a glass blower. Essentially, I just want you to think about a man who's a glass blower and he has all of his glass works around him up on a shelf, and he's got the big fire kiln in the center. And he has all of these different water pitchers that he has been working on for years, and they're all up on his shelf. And there is a little water pitcher up there, and it's surrounded by medium-sized water pitchers. It's surrounded by bigger water pitchers. And that little water pitcher keeps on saying to the glass blower, he says, hey, I want to be big like the other pitchers. Why didn't you make me big? I don't understand it. I want to be big like the other pitchers. And the glass blower finally says to him one day, after this little pitcher asking and asking and asking, why didn't you make me big? Why can't I hold all of the water that these other pitchers get to hold? And the glass blower says to him, well, I can make you bigger. I can make your capacity bigger. I can make you be able to hold all of that water, but I have to put you back in the fire. And I don't think you like that. And so it's that moment of realization of, if you want to be bigger, if you want to have more capacity, if you want to hold what you see all of these other people who you think are your inspirations, your mentors, or the people who all have more than you that you wish you had, it's because they have decided to get back in the fire willingly, and sometimes not willingly, over and over and over again. You know, when I'm at a period of time where I'm like, oh, I want more, but I'm so frustrated and this is so hard, am I willing to put myself back in the fire for a long period of time in order to be able to melt my other form down? Because that's exactly what would have to happen to that little water pitcher, is it would have to get completely melted down, and then held in the fire long enough to then expand and stretch and become something new.
And that's why they call it a meltdown, by the way. So when you're having a meltdown, it doesn't feel good, right? You're in the fire and you're literally melting, except you're being melted down so that you can be turned into a bigger, I'll use your analogy, water pitcher, or bigger, more beautiful vase, something that holds more capacity and gets noticed more, something that takes up more space. But you can't do it without the meltdown. I'll give you an example. 2008, 2009. I had an absolute meltdown of my career. It's when the recession hit. I was in banking. It was a banking recession. You know, the whole world had a financial reset at the time. And I had to lose not only our financial position, I had to lose our career. We had to short sale, which is basically one stop short of losing your home, the big, beautiful home that we had just finished building and moved into. We had to walk away from our rental properties. We had to get rid of all of our cars except for one that was so far upside down it didn't make sense to get rid of it, because upside down means you owe so much more on it that it's worth. You literally can't get rid of it. And then I had to melt down my identity. My identity at the time was, what's your next promotion at this world's biggest bank, and how many people work underneath you, and what do you drive in, and what neighborhood are you moving into next? I had to melt down what I thought were my dreams. I had to melt down what I thought was the vision that I thought we were going to ride off into the sunset with, even though I was like, 29 or 8 or whatever the heck it was at the time. Everything internally with me and externally with me got absolutely melted down. And let me tell you, it didn't feel like a fire. It felt like the inferno. It was terrible. And by the way, it doesn't necessarily, I don't want to, paint you the wrong picture. It doesn't go by quickly. It is a long fire sometimes. It took me a long time to figure out what our pivot was. It took me a long time for us to get back on top. It took a long time for me to figure out where I could show up with value again. And I felt kind of lost with having no identity. But that was the time, and this is a very important part of the story, that Lori said, never again, and started becoming Lori Harder as you know her today. First, she became the fitness star. Then she became the person that won all the titles. Then she became the person on all the magazine covers. Then she became the person who had one of the largest monthly workout plans online before the rest of the world had those. That's when she got into network marketing and ended up making multiple 7 figures per year with supplements. That's when all of these new things showed up, and I found a new identity in this new path that we started to take together. But it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen in a week. It didn't even happen in a year. It took me a good couple of years to show up again in what identity I wanted to show up in. In other words, the bigger, better glass vase in this analogy. And so it's going to feel like a fire. It's going to feel like an inferno, possibly. It doesn't have to take that long, but it can feel like it's taking a little too long. But on the other end is a brand new vase, if you will, that has a lot more capacity. Because when I look back, had I stayed with that bank, even though it was a great career, and worked my way up to the very top, we still wouldn't have made near what we were able to make in this new expanded form after the inferno.
Sometimes life can actually force you out, not by your choice. And a lot of times this is a blessing disguised as, like you're saying, an inferno to literally help you expand the vessel that you're in right now. And, you know, Chris and I were talking yesterday, and I think that sometimes certain points in your life, there's a lot of expectation around certain ages. I mean, we all know this.
Actually, guys, hold on a sec. I'm going to interrupt this podcast for something really, really important. And if you've been a longtime listener, you know I have never, ever interrupted my podcast to share something before. But the reason why I believe it's so important is I just had my annual tax and wealth planning meeting. And I've been given access, just like every year, to so many incredible tax saving hacks, so many privileged moves that I can make with my family office, that it's kind of unfair that everybody else doesn't get these. Now, if you're familiar with the family office, you have to have a certain level of wealth to be able to work with one. And most people listening probably can't just go and work with my family office. And so the reason why I haven't brought this up before is I haven't actually had a solution for you until now. A solution, quite frankly, that is so important, I'm interrupting this podcast for it. Now, dear friends of mine started a company a while back called True Wealth. And not only do I trust them dearly, I have watched what they have done with my friends and my clients to be able to coordinate their tax situation, their business compliance situation, their insurance situation, and their personal wealth management. Because these are not separate things. This is the number one mistake I see entrepreneurs make. They go out and they piece together these separate people for their business compliance and for their tax situation and for their personal wealth building, and they don't work together. Except that's the problem. Each one of these things actually depend on each other to maximize the savings. And I don't mean by a little bit, I mean by a ton. Because I trust True Wealth so much, I am sharing this with you right now, not as an ad, because I am not getting paid for this, but because I believe it's that important for you to explore. If you have a multiple six-figure business, preferably they're a good fit for those with a seven-figure business or close to it or higher, then I want you to hit pause real quick and set up a free call with my friends. Set up the call at chrisharder.me/wealth. That is chrisharder.me.me/wealth. I'm telling you, you can't afford to piece these things together anymore. You are wasting so much money. And if you're sick and tired of feeling like you're working too hard to have too little money left, these are the people that'll fix it, because there's a lot of money out there that you don't realize that could be left over that you don't have access to. So just set up the free call. They're my friends. I've literally never interrupted a podcast for something like this before, so you know it's important. Go to chrisharder.me/wealth and then let me know how it goes. I'll let them know that you're calling. All right, back to the episode.
You know, out there, I have a lot of friends who are like, by the time, if they're 30 and they're not married, by the time they're 35, if they don't have kids, you know, if they don't have a business, if they haven't made $1 million, like there's so many of these markers that we're unaware of that can make you feel like you're failing. And I think it's the realization that your life is actually going to reset and restart in multiple ways, many times. I'm not saying that your marriage is going to reset or restart. I'm not saying certain friendships are going to reset or restart. But when you look at the grand through line of your life, like of different people's lives, yes, there will be things that reset, that stop, that start over and over again. And I think when we hold these expectations, especially where Chris and I are in our mid 40s, it's like thinking that we were going to have these set identities, this set life, that our family was going to be set, that everything's going to be set. And it's the understanding that life is so cyclical. Like you are going to go through so many cycles in your life. And the difference of if it's going to be a life of growth or a life of pain when you get to certain part is how much you resist the cycles. And we're finding ourselves in another cycle of starting some new things again, of needing to have different ways of doing certain things, needing to leave old patterns behind that just simply will no longer work in the way that the world is. And things that we are like, wow, what worked for us here does not work for us over here. We have to evolve again. And I think what can happen in people's brains when they get into their late 30s, early 40s is thinking like, no, I already figured that out. And I was listening to a podcast the other day where somebody was talking about, for people as they age, the way to make sure that your career like stays viable and you stay successful and you stay happy in your life as you're aging. They were talking about how it's your ability to flex and grow and learn. So your ability to lean into what is this younger generation doing? Where is everything going? Not being so stuck and so rigid. I think we could all think of somebody right now who's really rigid, who's really stuck, who's older, who's just like, they're having a hard time in life because they want things to stay the same. And we all know the one constant is change. So how much can you lean into and flex with and learn from all of the changes and the people who are younger than you and the people who are older than you? So I do think there's this beautiful sweet spot where if we really lean in our late 30s, 40s, and 50s, that we not only have the wisdom now, but we can then learn from what's happening now in this younger generation and being like, where is it going and how can I apply my wisdom to that? And how can I move forward and know that the only constant is change? So know that we are going to have to change.
Listen, entire income sources are melting down and changing. Entire industries are melting down right now and changing. I'm sure you can name a few of them. Entire ways of marketing or showing up online or attracting people is melting down and changing. And like Lori was talking about, you can either step into the fire of learning what's coming in the new way to do things, or you can sit back in denial, ride out what you're currently doing as long as you can until you are forced into the fire. And this is the lesson that I think is very important. You can't escape the meltdown and you can't escape the reshaping because it's going to happen to you. But you can get a head start by raising your hand and saying, I'm going to step into the fire of learning the new things early on my terms right now while I can, so that I'm one of the first movers and I have first mover advantage, or I'm just going to be in denial and I'm going to hold on and hope and pray that somehow I get through this, and then someone else is going to shove you in the fire when you've got nothing left and you're not ready for it. And so you're either going to voluntarily go through the fire and then have first mover advantage, or you're going to be shoved into the fire at the time that you least want to be. But you can't escape the change and the growth. But the important thing to remember is on the other side is a new, bigger, more beautiful vase that can hold more. And whether that is holding more love or holding more time and freedom or holding more money or holding a bigger home for you or holding a better city for you or holding a better relationship for you, you can't hold it until you are reshaped into something that has more capacity.
I want you to really look at this as a positive thing. I know that feels insane, but I have never, ever volunteered for a fire or even been forced in a fire that hasn't fully made me better, made our relationships better if we choose. The key here is that you have to keep choosing to view this as, how could this be positive for me? I understand you're not going to necessarily get that right in the middle of it, but sometimes you just have to have faith and know that if you're in it, you are being melted down into a better form that will have more capacity. And whenever you're met with some of your worst fears, honestly, that's how you dissolve them. You want to know how you dissolve one of your worst fears is by facing it or going through it. And all of a sudden, it's like your capacity for anything like that is so transformed in your perspective that all of a sudden, because of the fire that you were in, you have a new business of helping people go through the same fire that you just went through. And that's how this actually works, is the fire that you're in could potentially be your biggest blessing, because it could be the entire reason that you're alive moving forward. And so I want this to be an invite into stop thinking that it's happening to you and how horrible it is, but to really say, okay, if this had purpose to it, how could I give it purpose? How can I move through this? How could I support myself through this? How can I learn about where I should potentially be going? And I know that for a lot of people, this can feel really overwhelming. It feels overwhelming for me right now. There's a lot of areas of my life that feel very overwhelming, but it's one bite at a time. You have to really just figure out where your focus needs to go and wake up every day and figure out the one thing that you need to do and just move forward step by step, inch by inch. Doesn't mean that you have to do some giant leap overnight, but it does mean that you just have to start moving in that direction.
Now, there's two ways that you can step into this fire that has something bigger and better on the other side. And this is not when I just talked about either voluntarily or waiting until it happens to you. This is either alone or with a professional glassblower. And what I mean by that is you can either just be one of the vases that is sitting in a shed that happens to catch fire and there's no professional glassblower there and you got to figure it out yourself for survival. Or a professional glassblower can say, oh, you're raising your hand to be next? Great. Let me take you and let me create a plan for you. And let me figure out what colors I'm going to add into you. And let me figure out how big you want to be. And then let me tell you how many times I'm going to have to put you into the fire and reshape you. And let me tell you what it's going to feel like. And let me tell you how we can do it even quicker. And that's the difference between being in a community or having a coach. That's the professional glassblower, or just catching fire in the shed and being left to fend for yourself. When we went through the fire in 0809, that's when we first found coaches. That's when we first found self-development events. That's when we first went to Tony Robbins. When we first went to Landmark Forum. It's when we first joined a mastermind. It's when we first started going to events. It's when we plugged in to all the professional glassblowers that said, hey, it may suck right now, but look at what we can turn you into with a little bit of hard work and a little bit of planning. And so I give you that analogy to say you can't avoid the fire, but you can come out the other end way better with some professional guidance and way quicker. And that's why we coach, and it's why we offer masterminds. And we've got two extraordinary masterminds no matter where you're at in your next level. If you're under $500,000 and your goal is $500,000 this year, that's our Mentor Collective Mastermind, which is turning out to be the greatest freaking program on the planet. Not our words, literally text messages that we just got over Christmas, text messages that we got the week before from members saying, as I reflect on my year, I can't believe how fast and how good this thing is helping me close the year strong. That's the Mentor Collective for under $500,000 earners. And then there's the Elite Entrepreneur Mastermind. This is the small room, the curated in person 3 times this year, one-on-one coaching calls with myself, texting access to Lori and I, but it's only for earners over 500,000. And most of the people in that room are 7- and 8-figure earners, but don't let that scare you. Don't let that discourage you. It's not about who makes the most money to get into the room. It's about who's the next best fit, because we curate that room with the right industry diversification and right skill set diversification, so that everything you need this year is in that room or one introduction away. And that's our promise. That's our promise. Everything you need this year coming up as we go through the fire is in that room or one introduction away. And that's if you're earning over $500,000. Now listen, real simple. DM one of us and say, here's my goal for next year. Which program would be best for me? And let's have a conversation to guide you in the right way. The Lead Entrepreneur is getting real full real quick. We literally had 5 people join in the week leading up to Christmas. So very few seats left in that one. If you really want to just skip the line and go right to filling out an app, you can go to chrisharder.me/mastermind. That is chrisharder.me/mastermind. Answer those few questions and we can jump on a Zoom. But if you want to explore which one's the best fit for you, send us a DM at Lori Harder, at Chris W. Harder, and we would love to hear about your goals for next year.
We're so grateful for you guys, and we will talk to you next week. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening. And if you loved this episode and know of someone else who is as successful as they are generous, please pass them on to me. It would mean the world to me if you help me get this cause and this message out to as many listeners as I can. So please, if you liked what you heard, it goes a long way if you take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star review and share this with your friends. I'll be forever grateful. And until the next episode, cheers to your success.